So we are excited to have Therese Hansen from TKWA and Jessica Kozno from Vandahay with us in person. I'm going to turn the podium over to them, and we can watch and learn and get excited together.
Good morning. Thank you to all of you who are staying and listening to our presentation today. This is such a privilege to be here. It was a privilege to be part of your vote today and hear the wonderful questions you all had. We're going to get into our presentation, but we just wanted to spend just a minute talking about who we are. So my name is Therese Hansen. I'm an architect with the Kubala Washako Architects. We're headquartered in Cedarburg. We have offices in Milwaukee and Washington State. We've done a lot of church projects. We love being involved in church projects just like yours. I have to say that, you know, there's 180 plus church projects, and you all have something very, very special here. Your building, your grounds, the spirit that's in this place is really something quite extraordinary. So this has really been a privilege to be involved in the committee that's been thinking about the future and setting a vision for that.
Hi, I want to also thank you for having us here. I'm Jessie. I'm with the Vandahay Company, and I helped with the, oh, sorry, is that better? Okay, I'm Jessie Cosno with the Vandahay Company. I helped work on the landscape master plan portion of the project. Our company is local to Appleton, and so we're kind of glad to be here.
I'm going to spend just a couple minutes before we get into all the really fun, pretty pictures, talking a bit about something called pattern writing. This is a process that our architecture firm uses before we come up with any designs or put any pens to paper. We use the written language to make sure that we're all understanding each other and that we believe that we've understood and listened to your needs in particular. So you'll see me go through a number of patterns. We actually did quite a few more that I'm going to share with you today, but in the interest of time, we're going to highlight some of the most important. And this really becomes the DNA of any vision that we start to create. And they start from the largest scale pattern and they'll get smaller. And I think you'll see what I mean as we go. They all have a name, an issue, and a solution. Importantly, with patterns, we try not to use like, it should feel nice, because that's somewhat, how do you describe that? We try to use words that are more decisive and can begin to lay out a vision. One of the issues that we heard, and one of the first that were diagnosed, we're calling Welcome to Campus. And the issue here is that you have this incredible place, but it's a masonry building with very few windows. It's pulled away from the road and the sidewalk, and it can have an unintended consequence of looking somewhat uninviting. The trees are such an asset here, but they also conceal the building and you're a little bit hard to see. So our solution statement was to use a variety of design elements that signal welcome so that everybody who comes to the site feels that way. The experience starts long before anyone even arrives at the front door. Use landscaping that defines the campus zone, such as unique plantings and colored paving. Consider reshaping or extending a covered entry canopy to reach out with open arms. And you'll see this type of thinking embedded in both the building and landscape plans. Our second pattern is called accessible to all. So the buildings here were built before accessibility needs were deemed important. While improvements have been made in recent years, you have an accessible bathroom right out here, there are still spaces which are prohibitively challenging for anyone to access. So the solution is that every upgrade to the buildings in sight must increase the permanent accessibility to all floor levels and community use rooms. Expand the number of accessible restrooms on every floor, especially in new social spaces. Add accessible pathways to significant exterior spaces, including the Memorial Garden. You have such a wonderful building, as I mentioned, and such a wonderful site. And so the indoor-outdoor connection became one of our patterns that rose to the top. This building can be very inwardly oriented with very few connections to the outside world. The lush River Valley site is a unique asset to your church that's underutilized. So our solution statement says, let the indoor and outdoor space flow as seamlessly as possible from one to the other. Provide clearly defined entrances and transition zones between important exterior recreational and gathering areas. Again, you'll start to see how this language and the DNA begin to show up in our plans and renderings. The gathering hub pattern. This was already touched on, I think, in the earlier portion of today's meeting. So much happens in a congregation before and after worship. This is the time when the spirit of inclusion can be made manifest. However, the current narthex acts more like kind of a crowded hallway than a place to connect hearts. This has the effect of dissuading lingering and talking for meaningful lengths of time. The solution is to create a place of gathering that accommodates the many needs of the heart-to-heart connection. It should be placed on the natural path to and from the car and directly outside of the worship space. It must be large enough to hold all who intend to linger and have comfortable seating pockets along the perimeter. Give it abundant glass to emit daylight views and strong indoor-outdoor connections. Our last pattern I want to read today is food follows function. So the issue is that the kitchen in the basement is not being fully utilized. Food is central to gathering and sociability, and this opportunity is being diminished due to its location. So our solution is to consider including a kitchenette space within the gathering hub. This may be as simple as a food station with counters or a kitchen zone for larger events. Maintain your basement catering kitchen as a full-service cooking space for larger event and rental opportunities. I hope you'll see as we go through the way that those begin to express themselves in the plan. TKWA and Vandahay have been working for quite a number of months now, thinking about all of the different needs that have been discussed today, both the inside the wall needs, the needs on the roof, the needs on the site, and then also just the ones that are highly visible and the ones that you feel every day. We've both created what we'll call like a master plan or a full plan, which includes all of the various needs. And all of those plans were informed by these goals and these important priorities, which are at every opportunity, increasing the accessibility of your building and providing a safe and welcoming experience for everyone, creating beautiful indoor and outdoor gathering spaces, which are flexible, and incorporating the natural beauty of the site. We're going to highlight just a number of these today, the ones that have become the priorities and have risen to the top. And we're going to talk about those within the reach of the campaign goals. So there are 4 tiers of possible giving that we'll talk about today. Level 1 is a $2 million campaign. Level 2 is a $3 million campaign. Level 3 is a $3.5 million campaign. And level 4 is a $4 million campaign. So when we think about the different reaches of the congregation and where you would like to see the investment, we wanted to structure the different projects in terms of priority, and you can see how these begin to add up as the giving increases. So we'll start with the level 1 $2 million campaign project priorities. The level 1 priority is a major investment into accessibility. You can see we've talked about this a lot today. And this is something you'll see both within the building and the site. There's also, as we've talked about, there's both the sort of outward facing and then more of like the behind the walls component. There's some deferred maintenance. I think you'll find in each one of these levels, there's a commitment both to the more outward facing appearance with, you know, I think some of the renderings you've seen, the way that the building appears, more of the inward pieces, some of the things that just make your building run and maybe you don't see them every day, and then more like reaching further out. So there's commitment to missions in every one of these fundraising campaigns. There's a commitment to maintenance, and then commitments to both the building and the landscape. So I'm going to go ahead in this first slide and we'll talk about the different improvements within the $2 million campaign.
Yeah, so to start for the level 1, for the first area of the landscape portion of the plan, a big thing we'd like to do is increase the accessibility to our outdoor spaces. So the first space we're going to talk about is the existing memorial garden. As you can see, it's kind of getting aged there with the existing flagstone. So we're going to propose resurfacing that with a new paver. And with that, we'd really like to, there's a step coming off of the chapel right now. So to bring that up and have it flush with that chapel door so that it's a accessible space from the interior to the exterior of the building. In addition, we'd really like to have a pathway coming to the front so that that space flows a smooth surface so it's accessible and welcoming to everybody. In addition with that, we'd really like to incorporate some, I have a conceptual planting plan for most of the site. Throughout that, we're going to try and add native and deer-resistant plantings as much as possible. We do have very friendly deer on site, so we're going to see how that goes. In addition to the level 1 portion of the landscape, we'd like to propose a new garage area for storage and helping facilitate being able to have additional uses for everything we have on site to all our maintenance issues. So the new garage is proposed to replace the 2 sheds that are aging on our site. In addition, we're going to also remove all the chain link fence that is worn and aged in the parking lot area. And then the next part is the new Grace Trail that's highlighted in yellow on the plan. This area is to help increase welcome and accessibility to our ravine space. So the Grace Trail is outlined in this dashed line, how it would run through our property. The goal really is to increase accessibility throughout the whole site so people feel welcome to our beautiful grounds and can really be invited in. So the Grace Trail would start by our existing entry sign, and it would wind down, and the trail would be resurfaced to be a stabilized granite surface so it's accessible, so people can have a smooth surface that they can enter our ravine space. So the trail would start and wind down past the Memorial Garden, and with the Grace Trail, there's going to be 5 alcove spaces for people to stop and reflect as they move through the trail. So the first stop is the Gratitude Trail, or the Gratitude Alcove. And with each of these alcoves, there's going to be a Aldo Leopold bench style type and a sign that explains what that restful purpose is along that stop. So you'd start with the Gratitude and then wind your way down past our Boy Scout Council Ring. You'd enter the ravine and go north here. The next stop would be Release and then Acceptance. And then you would wind. Right now we have an existing staircase and it's timbers, and they're definitely at the end of their usable life. So we're going to propose new stairs there. Those new stairs would have stabilized landings, so it's easier for people to access and come up that hill. So the challenge alcove would rest in, like, tucked in along that stairway in the hillside. And also with the staircase, we'd like to improve the view to the river. So we're going to propose very selectively removing some buckthorn and trees to help open up the view to the river from this space. And then we'd continue and come to the Embrace alcove and then come and continue all the way to our front entryway and through. So people are getting a whole view of our entire grounds.
The improvements to accessibility within the building are also part of this level 1, $2 million campaign. I think we heard very loud and clear that accessibility is critical here, and at this point, the CYF building across the ravine is not accessible. Once you come into that building, if you wanted to come to this building, you would have to navigate a set of stairs. So as part of the level 1 campaign, we're proposing an inclusion of a new elevator in the CYF building, as well as improvements to both bathrooms on the upper and lower levels. You can sort of see the arrows moving around on the screen perhaps. What this is showing is that if you were to come in, we would be taking a small bit of that classroom on the upper level to provide for that elevator space needed. You could go into that elevator, it would have doors on 2 sides, so that you could go in, go down half a flight, and you'd be at the bridge level, and you could head over to this building. Or you could go all the way down to the lower level and access the lower level as well. Both of the bathrooms on the upper and lower level are sized such that we don't need to take the surrounding walls of those bathrooms out to make them accessible. We just need to reconfigure the stalls and the different plumbing fixtures that are provided. So this is really a wonderful opportunity to create excellent accessibility in that building. In addition to that, a few of the other commitments in this phase of giving would be upgraded HVAC in the CYF building, which is currently out of date. Updated electrical panel. This is a critical need of the church that would be part of this level 1 campaign. And then all of the improvements to accessibility that we've talked about. Next, we're going to talk about the level 2, $3 million campaign. So in the level 2, $3 million campaign, it's everything we just talked about. So you can sort of start to imagine these as sort of building on top of each other. So within level 2, everything we just discussed is part of it. But now we're going to build on top with more investment now. We've sort of met our accessibility needs, so now we're going to be meeting community needs. So this is starting to build into community and fellowship spaces, both indoor and outdoor. And then we are now increasing all those commitments we talked about before. So there's an increased commitment to missions, increased commitment to maintenance.
So the first landscape area in the level 2 is to create a new space outside the existing fellowship hall and river room. We'd really like, as we mentioned before, to increase the indoor-outdoor connections. So this is the proposed design for that outdoor space flowing out of the fellowship hall. The idea is to have this be really open so that it's multifunctional. So it can be used for small or large groups. It can be used for our high schoolers or middle school groups to have a fire pit out there, or it can be used for large events when we're in the fellowship hall to come out and expand into our outdoor space. In addition, with this area, we're going to collaborate with Menominee Nation students. They're going to create designs for decorative panels along this side of the space, which also serves as a railing, and this side of the space. So that's a really cool way we're engaging with our community as well. And this is just kind of to give you an idea of how open that space is. It's really trying to be flexible. So it's just a large open space, and then also the trail, the Grace Trail, that's winding along the back side of this space. So if we're using this space, there's still a clear and flexible trail for others to move through the space without conflicting during events. This is just another view. It gives you an idea of those decorative panels on the side and how the trail is along the back side of the space.
I'm personally very excited about that because when I had the opportunity to tour the building, I've toured this a few times now, and every time I'm down in that space, you have all these windows and they look out over this beautiful area, but you go out and there's really nowhere to stand yet. So I think that's a wonderful contribution. The portion of gathering that we're talking about from inside the building is just on the other side of this wall where you currently have sort of the library and administrative area. The intention here, if we kind of zoom up and take the roof off of the building, is that we can reconfigure the space allocated in that zone to open up places for gathering. Right now, you're using the narthex as part of your before and after friendly conversations and catching up with people as people are trying to walk by, and this would give sort of an intentional place for people to linger and gather and connect. This could be used for meetings, this could be used throughout the week. This is a very flexible space. Part of this would mean reconfiguring where the library currently is. We would consider moving those library bookshelves and books into the chapel. So we imagine sort of the perimeter of that chapel housing the library books, and then the interior remaining flexible so that it could be used, it could still be used as a chapel, but it also could be used for meetings or the like, or used as a library function. What you're seeing next will be a view of this space. This space would be where the reconfigured pastoral offices are, an administrative area. So this right now, if you were inside the library looking to sort of the administrative area, that's the view that we're taking here. So we're standing in a kitchenette, which was one of our patterns that we talked about earlier, looking out into kind of a wide gathering space. As part of that indoor-outdoor connection here, we're planning on new windows and new doors, allowing this to sort of spill out to the front. You're seeing now sort of the wonderful shaped roofs that you have in this building and the opportunity for clear stories, those high windows which let light in. So we really see this as being a wonderfully daylit space. We're seeing in this image a proposed new door, which would be sort of roughly not quite by the booth back there, but there would be another connection point so that people could flow more easily in and out between the gathering zone and the worship. And now we've turned, and now you're seeing sort of beyond would be that administrative area, still highly visible, highly welcoming. And you're also seeing sort of the kitchenette off to the side. So this would be a very flexible space. We all know that people like to gather in kitchens and sort of come together in kitchens. And so having a place like this for everybody to gather around and meet is, I think, a really wonderful opportunity. Next, we're going to talk about the level 3, $3.5 million campaign. So again, we're building, it's everything in level 1. It's all the accessibility we talked about. It's everything in level 2. It's all of the sort of communal spaces that we've talked about. And now we're sort of stepping out to that welcoming zone. So we're going to go out to the front entry and talk about a new canopy and landscape. And again, we're increasing the commitment to missions and increasing our commitment to maintenance with this tiered structure. I went the wrong way. So here we are, we're sort of highlighting the current existing canopy. Your existing canopy is very mid-century. It has very clean lines and clean shapes, but it doesn't scream welcome. It has sort of a shadowy appearance. I'm sure it protects everyone really well from rain, but it doesn't do its job in terms of making it feel like this is the front door, this is who we are. In these images that we've proposed here you can see a couple different images here of a canopy, which might suggest something that's much more open, tilts up, lets light in. We're seeing something that would potentially have like a translucent top to it, which would still allow sun to come through, so it would feel really well daylit, and we'd get a lot of shadows and interesting, I think, interesting dynamics associated with that. It's a really large canopy, which would allow you to gather below it. You could put tables below it. The height at this point is high enough that it could reach up and over cars so that you could do drop-offs under the canopy in the event of rain. This view is beginning to show you the relationship of that canopy to the gathering hub we just talked about. So you're seeing some new doors, which would make those strong connections again between the gathering hub and these outdoor welcoming zones.
And the landscape in this area really is just supporting that architecture to help create that welcome feel and the aesthetics of the new canopy area. So proposing a new paver surface to make that welcome feel and help soften the space with some additional plantings and really help emphasize the welcome feeling with the canopy.
I think the location of all of the places that we've just talked about are really key. It's when you're connecting with people, I think we all have that feeling of you're walking and then maybe you stop there and then you keep talking and then maybe you stop just outside. And so having these places that encourage and make lingering and conversation comfortable along these paths between worship and then wherever we're heading next are really key to making sure that this place continues to become more useful to more people more of the time. The final level that we'll talk about today is the level 4, $4 million campaign. Again, we're including everything we talked about in level 1 with accessibility, everything we talked about in level 2 with gathering, everything we talked about in level 3 with welcoming. And now we're going to be talking about additional opportunities for us to touch other places within the church. So this, within the interior, we focused on this space and the needs within your worship space. Additional outdoor areas for classroom space. And again, we're increasing our commitment to missions again and increasing the commitment to maintenance.
So this section highlighted here would be the location of the outdoor classroom. And we're calling that an outdoor classroom, but really that's another multifunctional space that could be used for large or small groups out there. And so that's kind of gives you an idea of what that would look like, just an informal gathering space for many different groups of people to use. And we're hoping that this is also surrounded by a planting that a community would take on, and it could maybe be a learning garden or a community garden, or culturally significant to whoever wants to contribute to that planting on that in this space. And then the last part of the landscape in level 4 is re-envisioning the entry sign for our main entry sign. So that just kind of gives an idea of what that would look like, and then just to help make it feel welcome and bright and more cheerful, welcoming people, to add some plantings surrounding that new sign.
On the interior of the improvements for this phase, I think this phase is really starting to hone in around like gathering and learning and worship. And so as we talked about the exterior space, now for this space, there are a few needs that we are aware of. First of all, I'm standing on the chancel, which is not accessible today. This is something that we can be considering to improve. I'm going to put on the screen another church project we recently completed where we were able to incorporate just a small accessible ramp. That's being proposed just behind me on this side, where we can include the ability for anyone with any mobility issues to be able to come up on the stage comfortably. A few other items that we would be considering addressing in this phase when we think about maintenance requirements and capital improvements is the window right above me. I'm fortunately not in the glare right now, but I know that's not always the case for some of those who are up on the chancel during worship services. The windows, many of these high clear story windows in the building are original and do require replacement. So when we think about replacing this, we could address some of the needs to make this more translucent. We still think having daylight come in is really important, but the ability to not have sort of sun in someone's eyes when they're trying to look out, I think is a really wonderful opportunity for us to mend that. We also would have in this budget the opportunity to add acoustical panels to the space. Church worship spaces in particular are very interesting to think about when we talk about acoustics, because you have both the need for the spoken word and you have the need for music. And those have both very different interests when it comes to what we call reverberation, which is the fullness, which is why you can hear like my voice sort of bounces a little bit. That's wonderful for music, but it makes it hard for people to understand what people are saying sometimes. We want to, and have in the budget at this point, to include just the amount of solar panels to find somewhere kind of right in the middle. We don't want to dampen the sound, the fullness of sound. That's really important to the congregation here and the beautiful music that you have. But we want to be able to take some of that echo out so that you can hear what is being said more clearly. We covered a lot, but we are here for questions. We can certainly go back to any of the images that we presented, but we hope that this has helped you envision and understand what some of the priorities that we've heard from your congregation are. And we certainly thank you for your time and your attendance and all of your listening today. We'll get you a microphone. It's 6.
Yes? Oh, good. It's on. Sorry. This is all for me very, very exciting. And I think you've done a spectacular job of hearing what the needs are and trying to propose things, particularly with respect to accessibility. I date back to before this building was built. And you're quite right. Accessibility was not an issue at the time that this building was built. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned about in the plans that you have is that we seem to be significantly eroding the space available for pastoral offices and the administrative function. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that need and maybe persuade me that what appears to be a significant reduction is something that the congregation is able to function properly with.
Can I actually talk about that?
I would love if you
There is
would.
a ton of unused space in that area. You know, there's 2 people in that large administrative office, and then there's another office that's unused. And so this is just reorganizing space, that footprint that we're not using.
And I'll add as well, there's currently the server room is up here, which takes up some space, and that's not, this is really highly valuable space right here. This is where everybody comes in. This is first impression space. And so as part of this project, that server room would move downstairs so that the server could be down where it's cold. It likes to be where it's cold anyway. And then we could be reconfiguring some of that unused space in a way that really prioritizes. So there are 3 offices and then a flexible office included in the plans, as well as the administrative sort of welcome space.
Are you talking communion preparation?
So there is currently the sacristy is right outside
Yes.
here. And we would be looking to relocate the sacristy preparation to either the kitchenette, or there would be an opportunity to use the kitchen that's in the upper lounge for communion preparation.
Okay, in the gathering space kitchenette, that seems not very good to me because that's a busy time for us and it's, we've got people that are trying to gather and then you've got people trying to do work and also storage is an issue.
Yeah, I'm really
So-
glad you brought that up. And I think that's something that, especially the storage consideration, is something that if this is a desirable use of the space by the congregation, that we can build in the storage needs. And then the timing is certainly a good question, like when is the preparation occurring and how is that overlapping with the use of that space? And then are there other spaces that might facilitate that better, which would offer more privacy or more dedicated space for that to happen? I think it's an excellent question.
Could you think of the back end of the hall behind the chancel?
Right back here for communion prep. I think we would need to have a sink, which is not here now, but it's certainly something that could be explored. Yeah.
Can you pass this down?
What about the flower design that is built into the sacristy area? Because it holds a lot of materials that we need to use over the course of the year, different things. And where would that fall?
The current thinking is that could happen in the kitchenette. So if you think about sort of your kitchen today and all of the things that you're typically storing in the casework and cabinets in your kitchen, that's probably not something that we're going to have in this kitchen. It's probably not going to be a great deal of like plates and silverware and that kind of thing. This is going to be available for us to consider what is the best use for the storage. So right now, the thought would be that this big wide island would be a great use of space for the flower preparation, and then we could include below that island all the required storage. We haven't gotten into the level of detail to know exactly what that storage looks like, so it would be really important if this were to proceed that we really carefully scrutinize what does that storage need, how does that flow happen, and how do we make sure that we're supporting that function. But that was the current conversations that we have to date, is that that could happen in that space.
I guess I wanted to chime in with one thing here. Having been part of this process, it's been enlightening and exciting, and we've taken a lot of twists and turns. One of the things that really excites me just about the whole ethos around the project is that we are going to be moving away from singularly dedicated, inflexible spaces. So the staff really, I think, is supportive of that in many ways. One example is we're going to tighten up the pastoral offices significantly because that is dedicated space. And we want as much space as possible for use of the church or outside groups to be as welcoming and versatile as possible. So an example of this in conversations that we've had around the sacristy, around the kitchenette in the gathering area, and in the upper lounge. Do we need 3 separate areas all within 125 feet? Can we share space? Can we find ways to use space in more than one way? And so partly I think what you're seeing is we're trying to really make everything multi-use. And that does mean that there'll be push and pull from all of us to have to rearrange some of the ways we do things, or maybe I can't have my 5 bookshelves and 3 seats and large wraparound desk. But you know, what I really need. And so I just wanted to address that everything we're seeing is coming from, let's make this as multi-use, as versatile, as open as possible, especially for uses we can't envision right now. There'll be new ones that come up.
What about the vault that is in the office area? I don't know if it's fireproof or not, but and what do we need it for?
I don't know that I've seen the vault.
Let's have Vince answer that question.
Yep. There's actually 2 different pieces involved with that. We have a safe, which is where the collection goes, and as we get mail in during the week, things that need to be set aside for deposit go into the safe. And then we have what is called the vault, which is really just a locked closet. And there's a lot of stuff in there that is decades old that could probably be put somewhere else. We really don't need to have all of the storage all in that area. What we're looking at in the redesign of the office space would include storage space for supplies, that sort of thing. But we really need to look at what functions we need, what storage do we need, what spaces do we need for storage. And then there are other places in the building we can put things where we don't need to access them on a daily or weekly or monthly basis.
In terms of better utilizing space and not having things dedicated, I wanted to revisit the CYF side and the choice with the restrooms to not have an all-gender restroom on that side of the building. I feel like we don't release, like as a CYF teacher, we don't release all the students at once where we need the stalls and we need them to be able to go quickly. It usually is just one student popping out at a time. So if there would be any chance to maybe instead of having women's and men's, just have all gender restrooms on that side of the building.
I would say that's absolutely a possibility. I think at this point, this is kind of responding to maintaining capacity. But when we think about sort of what's required from the building code standpoint, both of these buildings are sort of considered in tandem. And as long as we're increasing the accessibility for anybody to move back and forth, we'd have a lot of flexibility for how those bathrooms are used. So I think we're showing one potential future, but I think that's an excellent opportunity if the need is not there to have all the toilets on that side.
I'm guessing that you have looked far enough into the future that we will go back to 2 services in this church. That's our hope and our prayers. I assume that you have looked into the gathering area with that in mind, that you'd be having people coming and going for 2 services and crossover in between the services for gathering for coffee or talking to somebody who came to first service, but you're coming to second. So that's been looked at.
Yes, we hope that it happens as well. We know and can see that on Sundays, one service is beginning to fill up. And so going to 2 is a definite possibility and hopefully in the very near future. I think that's typically how we would think about gathering spaces, is that opportunity to overlap with those of us who we aren't going to see at that service or who attended the earlier one. And so we think about that, especially in terms of just the capacity of the church and the ability to keep people safe and comfortable. And so we want to size that, it's a bit of a balance. We don't want to crunch the offices to the point that they're not feeling useful, but we want to expand that as much as possible. We envision that once the library is in there, that can also be thought of as a place for people to expand. The ability for us to open that up, I think in one of the slides you may have seen, we were showing it very open. That involves the reconfiguration of quite a bit of ductwork, and that might not be the right choice. It may or may not be. But I think the expansion of that to think about the gathering space is not just what we've shown here, but then also what is happening already in the way you're using the space today. And then the inclusion of that chapel space so that people can even walk in there and have maybe more private conversations as well before and after.
Yeah, sorry. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the your thinking on the articulation of the bottom of the Grace Trail with the existing bicycle running jogging path that's down along the river. On the one hand, it seems like maybe an opportunity to invite people to our grounds, to discover our church, to discover the nooks along the way, maybe the outdoor patio area. On the other hand, it might invite a lot of use of our grounds, and maybe some of that might create some vulnerabilities too. So I'm just wondering what the thinking on the space between those two and whether we expect people to be moving between them.
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, there's always that sort of push-pull with that kind of thing. We did consider and discuss that as we went through the planning process with this, and we drew kind of an informal, like less formal trail to connect that space. So people are still welcome from the Newberry Trail, but it's just a less of a, maybe it's only a mulch path or not as a formal entryway, so that you kind of have a balance of those aspects.
This is probably for you, excuse me, for you too, Jesse. How do you envision us using that trail in the wintertime? Because so many of the pictures are summer. And I think we have a little more winter.
Yeah. Yeah, so that stabilized surface actually could be shoveled off in winter if that's something someone is willing to maintain in the wintertime. Certainly the path is intended to grade out, so it's a little less steep to enter the ravine. So hopefully just with that, having a little bit easier access and being not so steep to get down there in winter would be more of a possibility.
We could do a $5 million campaign and have a snow melt system heated trail.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, the sky's the limit.
There's already traffic going through there summer and winter. We'll see tracks through the snow. It would just make it more accessible, safer for people to be traversing, whether we clear the snow off the trail or not.
Having had my office right there in the CYF building for over a decade, I can tell you hundreds and hundreds of people on a normal week move through our ravine, and animals and picture takers, everything. So having that just do what it's already doing, that's a good thing.
What is being envisioned for the coat racks and where our name tags are?
In the projects that we're talking about today, those would remain. We won't be talking about the reconfiguration of that. Depending on the reach and depending on the priorities, that can be reconsidered. As part of the overall sort of big picture plan, we had talked about opportunities to potentially move the coat rack storage, which is here today, to the bridge, and then put windows in here so we could have more light and visibility. But that's not included in any of the tiers we've talked about today. That's after the ice, yeah.
Just a comment on the Grace Trail. Since we put up fake cameras in the Grace Trail, we've had let no vandalism occur. In the past, we've had vandalism. We are also planning on putting real cameras up there, which hopefully will serve as a deterrent to vandalism. So.
Nothing has been proposed for the lower levels, so I assume that the kitchen, I know you said it's underutilized, but the music department is down, the choir room is down there. Nothing regarding music or anything going on has been included in either the step 1, 2, or 3.
No, we did identify certain opportunities for improvement down there, both in terms of like, not the music room in particular, but certain opportunities to enhance the fellowship space, enhance the opportunities for the commercial kitchen, enhance the HVAC, asbestos remediation. There's a number of things that can be prioritized down there, but those didn't come sort of above what we talked about today. So there are certainly opportunities and goals that can be considered that were developed by this group, but they aren't in the 1, 2, 3, or 4 that we talked about.
I think that there's an assumption, and maybe I should ask, that there's money set aside for office remodels though, so that could partially maybe apply to the music director's office. Okay, that is true. Okay, good.
If I could just add to that, when we're looking at the building and the grounds, we've developed master plans, and we can't necessarily do everything in this capital campaign. It's been since 1991, so 34 years since this church has had a capital campaign. We're not going to be able to do everything, and all of that deferred stuff that would have been done in one capital campaign. So we may have the vision of what we could see happening, for example, in the lower level, but that may have to wait for a future time.
So this harkens back to Pastor Catherine's joke about the $5 million campaign, and kind of dovetails into what you just said. Is what were the goals that we had to sort of triage out from these plans?
There's quite a few different pieces which would maybe be just icing on the cake, if you will. So in the plans down at the lower level where the fellowship hall and river room are, we had some plans to really open that up. It's a really wonderful space, but it's kind of hidden, especially for someone who's new. If you go down the stairs, you kind of have to go through a number of doors to find it. It can feel a little bit like a maze. Maybe not to all of you because you kind of know where you're going, but so really opening that up was one of the things that was considered. We also know that the upper lounge here is highly desirable meeting space, and part of that just has to do with it's the easiest spot to have a meeting, and so there seems to be maybe a perception that there's not enough meeting space here, and you actually have a ton. It's just not really well configured for it yet. So some of that may be as simple as just changing furniture, but the opportunity to use common grounds and sort of the place that you currently use as common grounds, considering using our new kitchenette gathering hub for that use, and then you gain that spot back for more meetings or more opportunities for small group things that you'll need to do. We also had on the upper level an opportunity to change this upper lounge once we find new meeting spaces into a nursery. We have a pattern which we didn't talk about today, but just nursery nearby, as you have young families that are coming here and they maybe have young children. You have this wonderful space back here, which I love, but if they wanted the opportunity to put their child into the nursery, it's nice to have that really close instead of across the bridge. So that was another one of the items we had talked about. Jesse, did you want to touch on any of the landscape ones?
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of additional considerations that we, or might end up being future phases down the road. One was a gathering space at the bottom of the ravine to help have an outdoor space. Another outdoor space that was flexible and accommodating for large groups. We also discussed the possibility of more trails throughout our grounds to really bring everybody through the whole site. There's the Labyrinth Garden, which is a really beautiful part of our site. So how do we bring people through all the spaces? So those are some of the other additional things that were discussed during the landscape planning portion.
If I could share for, sorry, John, too close? A little farther away? I don't like to see John jumpy. I'd like to share a little bit of the philosophy because you've seen a lot of pieces out here. One of the essential items, it was brought up in the congregational meeting, of what about the building reserve fund? It is now gone, all right? But the philosophy is our building and grounds council team is very much on top of what our 10-year needs are, and it totals 2.5 to 2.8 million at this point. We could have addressed this and said, let's fix everything that's wrong with the building and have the same building and come back 10 years later and start talking about it. The philosophy of this is essentially to carve out the essential pieces that need to be done in the next 1 to 5 years, to carve those out and do those, but then bring in the new vision of doing the new thing, which is Isaiah, which is envisioning. We don't know how some of the spaces are going to be used, but if you go back to the original movement to this church, a lot of the facilities that were built in here were not assumed that they would follow function. And they developed their own lives as the church aged. And so studying the history of this building and what the people who designed this building did, we have to have that same faith and balance of replacing what we need to, mindfully identifying what has to be done in the 5 to 10 year plan, right? And what is going to move us forward philosophically and as a total picture. That's the focus of Isaiah. It's not just fixing stuff, but there's a lot of stuff being fixed in Isaiah. So I just wanted to share that as sort of an overarching philosophy that we've used with the project.
Other questions, thoughts?
Very much. I just saw on each slide there was just 2 bullet points that just said for each of the plans increase commitment to mission and maintenance. Could you give just a few more details on what that commitment looks like and how maybe it would change as you go up for each of the plans?
Yeah, I don't have a slide on that, but starting in level 1, the church has committed, and somebody else may be able to offer more specific details, sort of a baseline commitment to, all the things I think we talked about. So, I think as we were just hearing, a commitment to sort of a future vision, a commitment to repairing what needs to be repaired, and then a commitment to outreach and missions, and then a commitment to set aside money to take care of these things that we're investing in. And so there's sort of baseline investments included in level 1, and then each of those jump by a certain amount every time we go up to a new tier. So, if you were going to invest $100,000 into sort of a landscape element or maintenance, that might jump up $25,000 or $50,000 with each one of these. And it's not as simple. They're all sort of individually allocated. So we could probably get more information for you on the specifics of that, though.
I can address the mission. The mission, to my recollection, starts at the 2 million level at about $40,000. And then at each level, it increases to at the $4 million level, we're committing $100,000. And the same thing with the grounds maintenance, starting with a base level and at each level adding $10,000 to $20,000 because we're increasing the scope of the work. So I hope that answers your sort of a sliding scale. If we give this much, there's this much to mission. If we give this much, it's amplified.
This is maybe out of left field, and it may be just something I misheard, but did I hear you mention solar at any point?
We haven't addressed that, but I know that that is one of the priorities. One of the patterns that was not included today, but is a pattern that was discussed as sort of a carbon neutral goal that the church is endeavoring, that with any one of these changes that we're enhancing and improving the building's footprint and contribution to the earth. We don't have solar included at this time in the $1, $2, $3, or $4 million, but that we did evaluate and identify multiple areas within your roof footprint, which would be fantastic opportunities for solar. You have a lot of roof space and you have a lot of really well-oriented roof space, which would be wonderful considerations. And there's a lot of wonderful grants out there that churches have taken advantage of to be able to bring in solar at a pretty affordable cost. So that's certainly something that could be considered here.
I think you inadvertently, and it would be so easy to do this, when you were referring to the panels in the sanctuary, solar panels came out, because that's a phrase we often use when we say panels. So like the sound absorption panels.
Acoustic panels. Oh, yes.
What are they called?
Acoustic panels.
Acoustic panels. So I think that's where it came
I'm
out.
so sorry for the
No, that's
confusion.
fine.
Yes. Well, I'm glad it brought up a good question, though, at least, because that is a really great question.
Additionally, with regard to solar panels, the time that would make the most sense to be looking at adding something like that would be after a roof replacement in that area. We've got all these different parts of roofs at different ages and different conditions. And so that's something that we'll consider, but it would make sense to do that at that time rather than put the panels up and then have to replace the roof, take the panels down and put them back up. So it is something that we'll be looking at going forward.
Maybe I missed, but how will we have access to this presentation? Will we have access in case maybe we know people we would like to show it to who worship online and we want to get them excited about what's going on?
Dale just said it's going on the website.
Yes, I think currently there's an older version of the presentations available that was shared as we've been progressing, but now this final version, which is sort of consolidated into the giving tiers, will be available on the website. I know that up here it might be kind of hard to see some of the graphics and you'll want to be able to like zoom in and see things more closely. That will be available for you to do so.
Look forward to an Isaiah Corner item that will link these presentations so that when you get your electronic copy, click the link and they'll pop up.
Just a comment from an old member of this church. This is just awe-inspiring to see what you all have done to come up with so many new ideas. I hope I can stay around a while and hope that we can really push on this capital gains, that it can get done, you know, in the next year or two. But this is just, it's just unbelievable to think that this place can become so much better than it already is.
Oh, thank you. As I mentioned, this place is really quite special, and you've taken really wonderful care of this place. The problems that you're all facing are really common. This was buildings constructed during this era, didn't include the thought that maybe people would want to socialize right out the door. They sort of said like, well, we'll put the fellowship hall in the basement and that's where people will go. And we don't use it that way today. If it's kind of off the beaten path, we're like, why walk down here? I can just talk to you right here. And so, you know, I think it was talked about like, how do you future proof? And you can't future proof much beyond 5 or 10 years, but we do like to just see who we are as people and what are the things we do and what are the things we always see ourselves doing. And so this building has, I think, as you mentioned, it's a beautiful place. It's really a special place. And I think the things that we're proposing here today are just really natural extensions to just keep growing and to keep building and to keep sort of the beauty that you already have even more spectacular.
I want to say one thing. We've had it come up a couple times how very many people have been part of this and committed so many hours, and we cannot name them all, but you know who some of them are. I do want to lift up one person, and that's Vince, because you know who the members are who do so much work. We really needed Vince. And so I just want to name a lot of this. Yeah. We're very, very grateful to have Vince. I give up.
I'm glad you're getting your steps in. Just a couple of historical comments in a sense. When we moved to this building, the prior building had no narthex at all. Social gatherings were simply not a part of church life because we cannot guess what the needs and the life of a congregation will be 50 years hence. My colleague, Chris Quello, who was senior pastor at First English Lutheran, was a student of church architecture and design. And a philosophy he had is that a really well-designed church building is good for 100 years, but only if it is reimagined at 50 years. And we're past that 50 years. And I think this is wonderful, imaginative redesign. I would actually like to see another 2 or 3 million so we can do that lower level stuff, which is really exciting. But if we can accomplish all this, and I know we can, and I have your home phone numbers, it's going to be just a marvelous gift, not only to the current congregation, but the congregation to come. So, Pastor Emeritus pep talk.
I don't think you mentioned in the chapel that expandable door was part of what level?
That's not part of the levels we talked about today. They're on either side of the door. It just looks like solid brick walls, but what's behind that is ductwork. It's as soon as you start touching MEP systems, the cost just jumps. So it's not that it's not possible. It just didn't become as high of a priority in these tiers as some of the other items we had talked about. I think we still envision that space as such a wonderful space, and the opportunity to expand and use it more is in here. But as it certainly is something that we were also attuned into, that if we could open it up more, if we could add more windows, if we could get more daylight in, that room may become even more and more inviting. So that's in sort of the overall plan, but it wasn't rising on the priority list as much as sort of the gathering area and the accessibility needs.
I had one thing I wanted to share. My excitement. I mean, this is a really exciting time. I've been in ministry now 16, starting 17 years. This is the largest lay-led effort that I have witnessed at any of the churches that I have served. And it's been done with equanimity, care, prayer, forward thinking, collaborative input with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of commitment and dedication on behalf of so many people. And that alone says to me, hey, we're on the right track, and I have a lot of faith and a lot of trust in what's going on here. So I'm excited to contribute towards this myself.